It was the year 1974, and there was a lot going on in our world. Bette Midler won an Emmy at the 16th Emmy Awards ceremony for the song Killing Me Softly. The Watergate scandal was coming to a head, and on August 9, 1974, President Richard Nixon resigned his position as president, making Vice President Gerald Ford the 38th president. The price of sugar increased by 400% that year. Patricia Hearst of the Hearst newspaper family was kidnapped in Berkeley, California, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s mother was shot to death while playing the organ in church. Liz Taylor was on her 5th divorce, and I am just entering the world. I am the second of 7 children. I have a sister Lori, who is 2 years older than me, and 5 younger brothers. My parents were hoping for a boy, and so I was supposed to be Robert Warren. Instead, they ended up with me, Bobbi Jo. Even though my sister was only 2 years older than me, she is one person in my life who I really remember reading to me. She would read the Little House on the Prairie series to me before bed each night. Many times, I would fall asleep while she was reading. She was a good reader at an early age and would usually tolerate my company. I also remember my mom and my grandma reading to me. Grandma always had her bookshelves stocked with children's books. Some were books that she had read to my mom when she was a little girl. To this day, most of those books are still there on her bookshelf, or have been passed on to me and other family members. Some of the books that I was given are Cinderella, What Shall I Put in That Hole That I Dig, and Harold and the Purple Crayon. As a family, we regularly attended church together, and our faith was and is a very important part of our lives. So it comes as no surprise that one of the first books that I remember receiving as a gift was a white Bible from my parents for my kindergarten graduation. I sure didn't understand any of it back then, but I felt pretty special because it was my very own. Since this book is the center of my faith, it is still one of the most treasured books in my home. In addition to the special people that read to me throughout my life, I also fondly remember my great-grandmother, who we lovingly refer to as Nanny, telling me true stories about her own life. She was born in the year 1899 and lived a very interesting life. She lived through the Great Depression and lived to see our world change and become a world that relies on technology. Her stories about growing up in the old days were so intriguing to me. I could listen for hours. These very stories became the inspiration for many of my writing projects in high school and college. My senior year in high school, I was given an assignment to write a paper about a famous person. I asked my teacher if I could write about my nanny, since to me, she was famous. She was my hero. My teacher thought this was a great idea, and it was my first piece of writing that I remember being very proud of. Later, for one of my education classes at Wright State, I was given an assignment to write my own children's book. At that time, I was student teaching in a kindergarten class, so I wrote a book geared towards their level and that applied to what they were learning. It was entitled In My Garden and was about how a flower begins as a seed and grows into a beautiful flower. The kids loved it. I have now been married for 12 years to a very wonderful man and my best friend, Blake. Together we have a 10-year-old daughter, Kate, who is now the focus of many reading and writing projects. One of my favorite things to do with her is to read stories. Now that she is a fluent reader, we can read chapter books that are quite amusing for both of us. We read books like Clementine, Allie Finkel, Anne of Green Gables, which was also one of my childhood favorites, and Little House on the Prairie, which also put her to sleep just like her mama. Recently, Kate received a certificate from her teacher at school for having the girls' highest grade for reading in her class. I am so proud of her and am so glad that reading is an important part of her life. My daughter also enjoys hearing stories about my childhood, just as I loved hearing about my great-grandmothers. She is so intrigued by how different my life was from her own. I hope these stories will live on throughout her life. In the book that I am currently reading, The Secret Life of Bees, there is a quote that I believe is so true. It says, "Stories have to be told or they die, and when they die, we can't remember who we are or why we're here." Much has changed in this world since the days when my great-grandmother grew up, and good old Laura Ingalls, well, I think she was wise to write about her life and share it with the world, as her legacy has lived on through the generations. Through it all, we have our real-life stories that carry on our legacy and remind us all who we are.